Bam.
Hey, this is Corinne Britti, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
This is awesome. Technical difficulties on my side, so Corinne was available, and it was great. Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show to talk about this super fun project. You're in the new Saturday night film that's coming out, and that is already like that subject matter. But this is such an interesting way to tell the story because it's not about the show itself, because that happens in the future in this movie. What an interesting story device.
Yeah, I think it's such a great way to tell it, and I think it, in my opinion, I think the movie captures that like pre-show adrenaline that you feel before like a big show. It's really, it was really exciting to be a part of, and like really exciting to watch it.
When you get the script for this, do you know what part you're reading for? Are you hoping for, I'll just say Gilda or Jane or whoever it's going to be, but tell me about that part when you get.
I only received an audition to play Valri. That was the only, she was the only one I auditioned for. And she was the one I ended up playing. I know that a few other, I don't think I was like, in the running to play anyone on the main cast. But I do know that a couple other people who did end up also on the cast also auditioned for my role, in addition to a bunch of others. But I was only called in for Valri. I don't know.
Right. No, it's not only. I'm just curious when sometimes you get involved in a project and you read something, you're like, this is for me. And depending on where you're at in your career, how much control you have and everything. I mean, I've been with friends who sat with them while they went in for the session to try to audition, and a lot of times it's daunting because you look around and you're like, everybody has dark glasses on and a blue denim shirt. And so it can freak you out a little bit, and you also don't necessarily know if you're the lead. I mean, your agent always says you got a real shot at this one, right? But you don't know. So I'm always curious in how that is. Like when you get this thing and you're like, oh, okay, how much? I don't want to say that. I don't want to suggest anybody's not professional at all, especially not you. But when you get that script and you work on that thing, what does that preparation look like for you? Like, how hard are you digging in? Because if you dig in emotionally every single time, it'll crush your soul.
Right. I mean, for this project specifically, the audition was one scene that was later cut from the final script. So I received the audition just like any other. I sent in a tape. I got the audition, and it said it was playing. They said, it's a real person, Valri Bromfield, and then they sent the video of her set from the pilot. She appears in the pilot episode of SNL for 2 minutes. I highly recommend you watch the pilot after or before watching the movie, just for some context. I think it's like it. There are parts of it that really, really hold up, and there are parts of it where you're like, wow, how did they even want to continue this?
Right.
There are some that are like really experimental things, but I mean, I honestly didn't. The scene itself is not, and her character, you don't really get to delve into like who Valri really was that much. For context, like I'm really kind of, all my scenes are with Nicholas Padani, who's playing Billy Crystal. And it's kind of the two of us who were featured players on that first episode. And we're just kind of going through our own little plot, whether we're going to make it even on the show, because there's so many people on the pilot. And so, there's not too much in terms of emotional stuff, but I watched her 2 minutes like close to 10,000 times. I mean, like just in preparation for this, I was just like, I really wanted to get like not just the voice down, but like the motivation behind, like she does characters. She does a set of characters, which is like, common for like, if you're a comedy nerd, but if you've never seen a comedy show before and you're just like, oh, I want to watch this TV show, seeing someone come on stage and like perform several different characters, it just like, it seems it's weird. It's not like normal stand up.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get like the motivation behind the, like why the characters are saying what they're saying. Cause like I'm playing a character. And so in
Right.
order to do that, I have to play the character, like play the,
I love it.
that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about. And then I don't know, the rest of the scene is truly like, I don't know, I had like 8 lines in the scene. And then I got a call back from the tape, and then I didn't hear anything for 8 to 10 months.
Comforting.
Because of the strike, I auditioned last year, and because of the strike, they had to delay filming. And so like nobody heard anything for months and months. And then February of this year, I got the call. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So it's funny. This is totally a different angle, but when you talked about you're playing a character who's playing a character, that's interesting, right? Because Michael Stipe from REM, he's singing. He does an imitation of Andy Kaufman, who's doing Elvis, right? Yeah. And so he's doing an imitation of an imitation, and it's an interesting device to do. But you're right, comedy and characters, these things go together. My buddy Dave and I always making up characters, like I have a question guy, and all these archetypes that you see in real life, and it is hilarious. I wonder, because you watch a scene so many times, right? And you take it in, and you think about the motivation of the entire group. Like everybody just wants to make this impossible thing happen. Yeah. And so, Valri I think she has 5 minutes originally, and they cut her down to 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. But in that moment, like, let's just get this thing off the ground. Let's just see if it's going to fly. It's already impossible, right? And NBC for sure. Like you watch Johnny Carson from that era. It's so great. Like it's so good. And so you're competing against. We'll just run a rerun and make more money, right? Yeah. So, how does Valri feel about losing those 3 minutes?
Honestly, like as a comedian myself, and like doing shows and stuff, like you're given, usually it's like 5 to 7 minutes. And they're like, we'll light you at 6. And like, I think that like, especially if she's been doing this for a long time, I think that's just so common where they're like, hey, actually, so-and-so dropped in and they're going to do 10. Can you do 3? Right. Like that kind of, like, it's so common. And I think like, and you can see that she's like such a pro, like knowing, like, I was like really nerding out about it, like as a comedian, just being like, you can tell that the set was definitely longer at one point, but she walks out at like 43:25 and she leaves the stage at 45:25. Like they told her 2 minutes and she did 2 minutes. Like you can tell that she's a pro, she didn't go a second over. And it also shows that the kind of respect that she had, because there are other comedians who you're like, hey, can you just really make sure it's like a tight, like hard 5 minutes because we have this other thing, and then they'll get on and they'll do 12 minutes and there's nothing you can do about it. And so like, right. And so, yeah, I mean, just that 2 minutes, like I was able to get so much out of it. Yeah.
It is a big thing though, right? Like, these are up and coming comedians, but it's also their shot, live TV right now, today. Right. And so if they were to put their foot over the line a little bit and take an extra couple of seconds, they may never work on that show again. Yeah. But if they kill, oh boy, like, okay, you know what? You're not longer a presenting, you're going to be a feature, that's a career maker potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, that's what's going through all of their minds is like, this could be, I mean, throughout the movie, you hear everyone being like, oh yeah, I'll see you at the next, we'll be gone in 2 weeks, or like, I'll see you at the next thing, when we're back on the unemployment line, and then there are some people who are like, this is my big break. This is like the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. And I think for Valri, at least, I think that's how she's treating it. Like, because she knew Dan Aykroyd, they were comedy partners. coming up in the Groundlings or I think the Groundlings, the Second City, all that
Second
stuff.
City, yeah,
They were some of the first people to do that.
Right.
And then so she'd known Lorne for years, and like he brought her on specifically to be on the main cast of his show, The New Show, in the 80s when he left Saturday Night Live. At that point, I
Right.
think it had been renamed, but yeah, I mean, like they're I think she really was like, well, I want to keep this relationship with Lorne, and I just want to keep doing this comedy stuff. And she had done appearances on Lily Tomlin's specials up until that point, and so she knew that they had a good relationship. And I think she just wanted to keep that, and like, this could potentially be her big break. I think she really wanted it to be.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're mentioning all these things. You could throw the name David Letterman in there because there's some of that action for her as well.
Yeah.
And so you're around all these either established things, like Lily Tomlin was huge and only getting huger back then.
Yeah.
But there's so much rocket fuel in all of these projects and all of these careers. Not everybody gets to go to the top, but the top's kind of dangerous too. So it is interesting to be able to do that. Do you think we're going to look forward 10 years and see the same thing from this project?
I don't know, like for me?
Yeah, well, anybody. Yeah, it's in general.
Or
I
mean, I think like, a lot of people are saying like, yeah, this could be a star making thing. I mean,
right.
I think part of what Jason wanted to do was cast not unknowns, but not people who are household names necessarily.
Sure.
Like there's definitely a few people who are like definitely better known in the cast, but the majority of the cast is made up of people that you are not used to seeing on screen and that people don't know the names of, which I think only helped with the energy on set more, because for a lot of us, this was a huge opportunity. And I think on the actual day, in 1975, that it was a huge opportunity, like some people's first TV appearance ever, some people's first comedy job ever, where they got paid to do it. And so that was like very much the energy on set. I'm hoping I'm actually answering these questions.
I think you're answering it great, because we're talking about an unknown thing too.
Yeah.
When Jason Reitman, by the way, for everybody, he's the guy who runs this project. He is looking to establish things, and there are so many of these shows or movies that launch careers, like The Office. I didn't watch The Office when it first came around, but you look and you're like, oh my god, all these people that have just exploded, and Dazed and Confused did that for careers. All kinds of different projects where, just by taking this new cast of people and then you watch they get seen and they do well, right? Even if it's not a leading part, you still are in that thing, and people's careers go places from these. So yeah, I think you answered it. Yeah. And just for everybody watching, this is not her first project. She's been in other things that have been really great. So we're just talking about these little pieces, though, because all of these, any project, and I know you know this, but any project that happens, it's impossible. Much like the movie that you're showing, all of the impossibilities in the frame. Like, how do you drive this airplane? And by the way, anybody who's seen Saturday Night Live has seen a sketch just that kind of goes on too long, and you're like, oh boy,
Yeah.
So that's the nature of that machine. It's going to kick out some clunkers, but when it kills, the thing stays killed for 50 years.
It's legendary. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think that's part of the appeal, is that SNL has always like taken risks, and they specifically seek out, to this day, they're not hiring like household names ever. You never recognize a single name on the cast, and SNL makes them who they are. Like, Kristen Wiig was not Kristen Wiig before SNL, and now
now look at her.
Exactly. Like all these people who are, it's one of the few places on now, especially, it's one of the few places on TV where they'll still do that. They're not looking for like an influencer. They're not looking at your, TikTok followers to make sure that this thing can be a hit. It's like, no, we want to find people who are scrappy and who are dedicated to the craft. And just because they're not successful yet doesn't mean they can't be. So,
right. There's like that balance between expertise and influence. And sometimes influence arrives first, and then you'll see someone, you're like, oh boy, and other times you see someone show up and you're like, wow, where does this person come from? And they're like, where have you been? I've been doing this for
yeah. There's some people like Leslie Jones. She was like 50 when she was on SNL, and she's like, I've been around for 40 years. Nobody cared.
Yeah. I think it was Bonnie Raitt won the new performer Grammy, and she's like,
what are you talking about?
You guys know I've been around for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So but hey, whatever. Whenever you get it figured out because it is part of the responsibility. I mean, you're a comedian, you're an actor. It is your responsibility to sort out the audience. You got to be able to sort out your 5 minutes, your hour, all of these things, and that means understanding the audience in the room, but also knowing how to build out a new room. I'm going to go work Topeka. It's a great comedy town. I'm just making this thing up. That doesn't mean that you're the great person. You've got to figure out how to build that room for yourself so that you always can go there and ring the cash register up and get paid.
Yeah. That I think touring is like my purview has always been like New York, like the Brooklyn comedy scene. And I don't think I've dedicated like enough time, at least to my stand-up, to really want to like actually tour and stuff. And that can definitely make or break people, because what works in a room, like in a 20-person room, like cafe, at 9 p.m. in deep Brooklyn, is definitely not going to work in like deep Ohio. And so I think, it's like, do I stick with my voice, my personal voice, and like how I feel like the type of comedy I want to do, or do I try and be the type of person who can, or do I, try and fit into Ohio, or like, and how can I maybe, merge the two and become like something in my own voice that can work in, I don't know, Dayton, Ohio.
I love asking this question because it's so fascinating. So when you go to a party and you meet people you don't know, and they say, well, what do you do? What do you say to them? Because I know I've got slashes. We all have slashes, right? But like, what are you? What do you do for a living?
For a long time, it was, I would say like my day job. I would say like, oh, I'm a dog walker, especially when you're not successful. Even if like I went to college for acting, I'm very qualified to do this job.
Right.
I have a degree, but I never felt like an actor, especially when I, wasn't really doing well. And there's still some days today when I don't feel like an actor, if I'm not, constantly doing well. And so like, because the inevitable, when you say you're an actor, the inevitable question is always like, what have I seen you in? And like the answer for me for a long time was nothing. Unless you're like really diving deep on like Amazon Prime and like looking at, tiny little projects. But I would usually just say my day job. I was like, oh yeah, I'm a bartender. I work at a restaurant, something like that. And then recently I've been more confident to be like, I'm an actor. And or like I'm a comedian, that type of thing. It always depends on the type of party I'm at too. If I'm at like a normie party full of like civilians, then I'm like, oh, I'm in communication, because usually nobody asks any follow-up questions, and then we could just get on with the day. But if I'm in, a party of like artist people, then I'm like, yeah, I'm an actor. Cause like everybody's, it's New York. Everybody's got like seven different jobs that they're 7 different careers.
I mean, that's how you get to create things, right? You have to make a little bit of money. To make money, I walk dogs, but what I do is acting. And I've been in a couple of things you've probably seen, or maybe not, but hang on. I'll be into a bunch of things. Have you seen the movie Saturday Night? That kind of thing. You get to say that now.
I know, exactly. Yeah, I know. I get to say like well, there's this thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very validating.
Yeah. But that's why I like to ask that question, because some people for their whole careers are just uncomfortable saying, oh, like, saying you're a comedian. Okay, well, what does that even mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a comedian. I tell jokes all the time. I don't get paid to do it, but
Yeah.
I suppose if I tried, I probably could get paid some food or something right away, because it's not, the
Yeah.
entry level is so easy, right? And I'm
Mhm.
making something that most people don't do easy, but if you know you're making money and your living is getting paid to act or do comedy or sketch, whatever it is, that's impressive. I like to say, like, it's like swimming. Like, do you know how to swim? Yes. Are you a swimmer? At what point are you a
Yeah.
swimmer? I swim 2 times a month. Hey, you're a swimmer if you swim 2 times a month, no matter what you do. But that's not sexy, right? To say, oh,
No.
I swim about twice a month, I'm a swimmer. But maybe you swim 10 miles in those 2 visits, or maybe you swim 2 miles, right? You're swimming more than like 99% of the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, like, the one thing they always, I don't know who said this, but it's like the thing about being an artist is that you're always an artist, no matter what you're doing. Like, if you're creating stuff, then even if it's twice a month, if you're like, a lot of people who like played soccer in high school and then never again, and like occasionally on the weekends, they say, oh, I'm a soccer player. That's how they identify. And I think that's great. Yeah, you can always be a soccer player, even if you don't play soccer, like you can identify with that type of thing. And like, yeah, I was always an actor, even when I wasn't saying I was an actor. And, I like, whether I liked it or not, because I made this choice. So, and like, I can always, I'm always a you can say you're a comedian if you make jokes all the time. Although if you do say that, then you have to be willing to like deal with the consequences of like, oh, great, when's your next show? And it's like, oh, not like that.
No. I'm doing it right now. Yeah. Yeah. I'm cracking jokes with you at the bank. So this show has turned me into an executive producer. I produce things.
Yeah.
And it's not sexy. If you look at my IMDb, you're like, who even? It's a shadowy character, right? Like, it's not even a real thing. And I'm working on a couple of movie projects. But when you're in pre-production and development, you're still executive producing, but you can't be like, well, I'm an executive producer, but you are, and so it is a thing about confidence, and depending on what party I'm at, right? How hard am I selling? Oh, I don't want to work, so I'm just going to be, I have a podcast. You don't care about that. Let's talk about you, right? That's the kind of thing I would do.
Yeah.
But
deflect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because if I have, and then, like, okay, we'll just use me as an example here. Let's say I have 5 documentaries, I don't know, 10 years from now, whatever it is, right? That's a legit documentarian, but I could still be invisible to like 99.999% of the world, even though I've done it. It still won't mean anything potentially because they're documentaries. A lot of people don't watch them. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like those kinds of jobs are all throughout Hollywood at every level. You can say like, oh yeah, I executive produced, Dune 2 or whatever. And it's like, you look at the list of executive producers and there's like 500 people on there. And it's like, yeah, because you referred the lighting director to the actual producer. And so contractually you get your name attached to this thing so that you go to festivals and say like, oh yeah, I executive produced Dune 2 and all that. And so it's like, you find that at every level.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have desire to get behind the camera or get on the producing side?
Maybe. I mean, out of self-preservation as a performer, like more than anything else. Like, I mean, yeah, I've produced a comedy show and like produced, sketches and like video things and things like that. But yeah, nothing like, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what the future holds. Like I'm always just interested in like being a part of a creative project for sure. But I just hate like scheduling, I don't like admin. I don't like that part of it. I just want to I just want somebody to give me my lines and then I can.
Yeah. We're talking to Corinne. She's in Saturday night and she's, well, look, I'll let you tell about this again. But the main thing is go watch this thing. It's coming out in theaters on the 11th of October in 2024. And after that, it'll be on streamers. We all know this stuff. So when you guys see it, and who doesn't love Saturday Night Live? I mean, watch a movie that's about the very beginning of this thing.
Yeah.
I want to go back to slashes because you haven't really said you're a writer yet, but you have to be a writer because you're a comedian. And that means that you perform and write things all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, out of self-preservation. I wish I was better about being able to like sit down and like write, for 30 minutes a day or whatever. But and like I've always loved writing. Like, when I was a kid, I was the kid like writing stories in school when I was supposed to be doing math homework or something.
Yeah.
Like I had a very rich inner life, I like to say. And so, yeah, I've always been kind of writing, but it's like you're saying, it's like, I haven't written like a movie or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Or I've never finished a screenplay. So like, but I guess that's more like any other writer than anything else is having a hard drive.
But the second you write a bit that gets you paid, whether someone else performs it or you get paid to stand on stage, and I mean paid like they give you chicken wings, you've done something.
I've gotten,
most people
I've gotten my fair share of drink tickets from things I've written. Yeah. I guess I definitely have to say I'm a writer because things go hand in hand. Yeah. But
it is weird that we have these feelings and these internal rules about this stuff though. It's just it's such an I'm always fascinated by it because again, people that I've got books on my shelf from all the authors we've had on and they'll be like, I don't really talk about my writing, and I'm like, you've written for all of
you're a published author.
Many times over, dozens, some of these guys. And some of them write for very big, like you can write for like Tom Clancy, you can write under his banner, and so like you don't get picked to do that if you're not a writer. You're like, I struggle to say it, and it's such a, I don't know, it's such, you want validation as an artist. You want to get paid.
That's good.
This
to
is
know
like your dream, right? And yet we're embarrassed to say these things out loud.
I know. It's good to know that the imposter syndrome never goes away. That's fun to know, no matter what the level you're at. Actually, that's something that like I was talking with Presley Coley, who's also in the movie. She plays the associate producer Barbara Gallagher, a real person. And she was like talking with some of the more well-known actors, and they were saying like, even at a higher level, even if you're like making money and doing red carpets and like and all that stuff, like it never goes away. Like you always still kind of feel like, I don't know, you always feel like I'm not doing enough or, something like that. I don't know.
It's so I live in Orange County and I know a number of publicists who do things in Hollywood. And so I'll get invited to go to things and I'm just some dumb dude. Like I'm just some guy walking in. I'm the easiest guy. I used to be in combat, so I've been shot at. I've been hit by a tank, so I'm just like grateful to be anywhere. And I'll be in this room, and there'll be a couple of people I recognize, either because I'm aware of them professionally, or they're just famous enough that I'm like, oh my god, and I don't act like, oh my god, but I'm like, oh, there's a person from like I happen to know professionally be related to a lot of the people from the show Happy Days. Right. It's like a mega show. And so when you see Anson Williams, like that's Anson Williams. I've looked at his face a million times, So, but I don't know everybody in that room. So I'm like, I want to be myself, but you also don't want to be disrespectful for someone, like so I always feel like it's hard to be a guest at these things sometimes because I'm not going to study. I'm not going to ask who's there. I'm just going to be myself. But it's really uncomfortable a lot of times because you see all these people like, I don't know who they all are. And some of them you can tell are fancy, but I don't know. Have you experienced this at all? Like where you end up somewhere and you're like, what do you mean? There's, so-and-so, like I've never seen them in real life and they look so different. Oh my gosh, you're right. It is that person,
I mean, I guess like, I don't know. I've never been a person who's like been starstruck. I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to work with like, even before Saturday Night, I've worked with like very well-known people. And I don't know. I always am like, I don't know. I guess to like build myself up, I'm always like, you're not better than me. You're just a guy.
Well,
Like,
this is kind of what I mean. I guess what I'm saying I experience is the antithesis of starstruck, right? I'm like,
yeah.
oh, who are you? You know, like that. So one
Yeah.
time I met Heather Dubrow because I was helping a friend of mine who's a very famous person, and she was the next person going to use the studio, and she came in like, oh, that's Heather Dubrow, and I'm like, okay, that's great. Who's Heather Dubrow? And then she big timed me. And I'm like, well, now I'm really not impressed by this person. And so you go to these parties or these events or these, promotional things. And I'm like, I don't know who anybody is. I know some people, right? But I don't want to be rude either, though, right? And so I'm sort of like underwhelmed by the whole thing. And I'm just there to have a good time. I'm not trying to work or anything. And, maybe we'll do some work. Maybe I'll talk about some professional things, but it's just kind of funny when, like, what's the name tags? You're like, who are you? What have you done?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a gigantic, successful, like, oh, sorry.
Behind every like giant project and like the 5 people whose names you do know, there's like 10,000 people who are like well known. It's just like industry stuff. It's like in any industry you get that. It's just like you walk into a room full of structural engineers and then everyone is like fawning over this one person and it's like, who is that? And they're like, you don't know Trent McGovern? He invented joists. And it's like, oh.
Yeah. Okay. Is that true, by the way?
No.
Okay. I was with you on it. But I always say this too, but the Hollywood Hills are full of a bunch of people you've never heard of. They're hyper loaded, but they get paid and they spend their money living on the top of a hill.
Yeah.
And you would never know who they were.
Yeah. And they're like one of the most powerful people in Hollywood.
Yeah. So you're a New York gal. Do you want to come out towards the West, or do you like the city vibe and the work that you get out there?
I mean, I love the East Coast. I've been an East Coast person my whole life. I love living here. I came here for college and then I didn't want to leave,
Right.
I've been here like over a decade. Like my life is here, and inevitably, hopefully, knock on wood, like, I'll be successful enough to like be asked to come out to the West Coast. I think that would be, it would be lovely. But I don't see myself ever living there for a long period. Although who knows?
Yeah. So we talked all this stuff about like, what do you say you are? Have you made it? Are you going to be able to make your money and take care of yourself as an actress, entertainer, writer, comedian?
Not yet. I think especially now, like with streaming stuff and new media and like the majority of I still have a day job, the majority, that's just the reality. Like a lot of the, under a certain number in the call sheet, like all those actors have day jobs,
Right.
And the majority of my acting income had been from non-union commercials. That's just the majority of commercials. Like name any giant brand like that you think, in 10, 15 years ago would have been paying $60,000 for a single commercial, that like actor's dream that, that's always portrayed as like, oh, you do one commercial and then you're set for life. Yeah. That is not the reality anymore. You're like lucky to get $2,000 from a giant company that can definitely afford to pay you more, but because of new media and like targeted ads and things, they're like, oh, we can't pay residuals on that because we don't know how many times it's gonna play.
Yeah, right.
Exactly how many times it's gonna play. That's how else why would you make the ad? It's like it's all those things where like, oh, we don't know. But they have metrics for like tracking your eyes on each thumbnail. Like
oh my gosh,
they measure the views, it's like. And so, now that and so a lot of like, I don't know if this is a tangent anyway, but a lot of like actors who like working actors, the reality is like, do I even join the union? Because the work dries up. And so I like, that was, it was like a big thing. I was like, this project, like I've been on union projects before, but a lot of them, I've worked them in states that are like to work states, like an anti-union, thing. law. And so I was able to kind of like avoid it because I was like, well, I'm doing these commercials like several times a year, and like I would not make money. And there are way fewer union commercials out there. And so like, yeah. And so I, now that I am in the union, it's like, it's great. It's like, definitely, it's a milestone for every actor. But the reality nowadays is it's like, that's a choice that you have to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is tough. And we're just talking about the acting side now, and you all went on strike and you got the best deal you could get and really had to shut the industry down to do that, right? And now you bring in the illustrators who are being absolutely ripped off by AI, and oh my gosh, it is an uncomfortable time.
Yeah.
And even in the industry, like my level as an executive producer, but up there, like it's hard to sell projects right now because nobody knows what's coming up, and there's an election coming. None of that helps, right? And so it is uncertain times, and I get a sense that, I'm probably totally wrong on this. I'm just a sense, but I think live, not modified performances are going to make a comeback, because I don't want to watch a robot. I don't want to watch something that.
This is the thing. It's like the only people interested in AI are people who will like directly monetarily benefit. Like, I'm actually not interested in watching like an AI rendering of The Rock, like in a rock movie. That's like something they're talking about, is like, oh, we'll body scan all these famous actors and then they can be in 17 movies a year. And I'm like, okay, well then you're charging $2 a ticket, right? Like, and like, I'm not, I'm not going to pay $22 to go see a movie with The Rock if he wasn't actually ever there. Like, why would I go see that? I'm not interested in watching an animated movie where there wasn't a single human being involved. Like, we don't watch it just to consume it. It's just like such a bleak outlook on like people who consume media. It's like, oh, you just want the thing. It's like, no, it's like, we want to engage with a story. We want to like remind ourselves what it's like to be human. We don't just want like lights and colors on a screen, although some people do. But there's a time and a place, and like, it just sucks, man.
It does. And when like when I think about like having The Rock being plastered onto some kind of thing, and then I quit watching superhero movies, like for the most part, because I'm like, oh, is all hope lost? Oh no, whatever, it's gonna happen, and it's just the same story, and I'm like, I don't want to watch it 35 times. I don't care who the character is. And so I just have given them up, and I don't in any way miss them at all. And I would rather create something or do something with my friends, and I'm not a good customer for those guys, because they lost me a long time ago. And I get that it's a roller coaster ride and it's fun and everything else, but like every single time it's that. And so I'm like,
I think that's the general perception, because they oversaturated the market, like, it's like, oh, it's another one of those things. We're going to see a guy in a primary colored suit fighting guys or whatever. It's like all the movies also look the same. Like, at least with the comics, like there were different styles of art and like different vibes. And it's like, they're all just like visually the same. And I'm like, well, then why would I want to watch that?
And this brings us back to what Jason has created with Saturday Night. They didn't want to do the same kind of comedy. You had Second City players coming out. You also had the folks from National Lampoon that were being pulled out, but like, hey, we're going to do this thing. And it was a real edgy, different kind. I mean, you don't bring George Carlin in if you want normal and safe,
Yeah, he was not for network television. It's crazy that they allowed that.
Yeah. And there are so many stories with that, with the history of Saturday Night Live, the TV show. Like Elvis Costello didn't play the right song because that wasn't the right song. And they're like, well, you're not coming back. So how familiar are you with the early history of the show? And I mean, obviously, your part and everything. I'm not saying that, but did you go back and watch a lot of these old episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the pilot God knows how many times.
Right.
And I watched a bit of the first season. But yeah, I mean, it's a completely different show now. It's like almost unrecognizable. It's crazy how much it's changed over 50 years. But
Yeah.
I think the core obviously stayed the same of like it's relatively unknown actors or performers, and they're trying something, and it's it's constantly trying to like find the new thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was about as familiar with the history as anyone else is. I mean, I've definitely been more than a casual fan of SNL for as long as I was like able to from the first time I was like able to stay up late enough to find it. And like everybody's got their favorite cast, and like it's usually the one that was the cast when you were a child, when you were watching it. But yeah, as much as like that first original cast, I really didn't know that much about it, to be honest, before this movie. And it's cool. I mean, it's like, obviously it's in my interest. It's like,
right.
It was cool to learn about it.
When you think about the difference from the first season to where we are now, how would you say the show has changed?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just in the sense of like the humor alone, like the types of things that people would find funny in the 70s is like not on a, for the most part, not what we would find funny now, only because they did it first. And then everyone after that copied them. And then that became like your dad's sense of humor. And of course, you're not going to find that funny, when you're growing up. But it's really cool to watch the origin of a lot of these like senses of humor and things. And then it's cool to watch a sketch and you're like, wait, that's really funny. That's really good. Like Wolverines, the very first sketch on SNL, that very first one. This is before SNL had the formula of always doing a political sketch right before, as the cold opening, right before the intro. Wolverines, it was Belushi and then Michael O'Donoghue, who was the head writer of SNL at the time. And it's the dumbest like idea. It's like, it's very quiet too, which I like. It's not comedy now is like a lot quicker and they don't allow for a lot of like silence. But what I loved is that it's like Belushi coming out and he's got like a grocery bag and he sits in an armchair across from Michael O'Donoghue in an armchair. And then he was like, and then it's literally just the lines of like, I would like to feed your fingers to the Wolverines. And then Belushi is like, I would like to feed your fingers to the Wolverines. And it's like an English lesson, but it's not. And it's just the dumbest thing that anyone's ever thought of. And there's no context. It's not like you don't need to know the story beforehand. It's just stupid. It's just silly. And then it's like, I was like, oh my God, that's something that I would watch now. That's like something that would be on SNL now. Like, that's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like they go through eras where characters are a big thing, and we can all right now clock a bunch of characters throughout and all 50 years. Like you can say, there's the wild and crazy guy, there's the copy guy, like you're making copies, and all these characters. Do you think they do enough of that character stuff now, or is that kind of gone by the wayside?
I mean, I've sent in tapes for SNL before, and they do specifically ask for characters. They want characters and they want impressions. I think that's definitely still a part of the fabric of SNL and like of comedy in general, of like developing an original character and like using that as the root for like multiple sketches. I mean, I'm trying to think of like some good ones from like years past, but yeah, it's definitely fewer and further between nowadays, but like, especially on like the Weekend Update desk, I think that's like where they're always looking for like a character and stuff. Like I love Sarah Sherman's, like when she pretended to be Colin Jost's son. It was so good. That, I mean, and like There's a lot of, so far there have been a lot of one-offs, and I think they're trying to find, I guess, those recurring characters.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like they lean too hard on politics now. It's always been a political show with a lot of that kind of in it. But it's like, when in doubt, let's bash this thing, And I'm like, oh, I wish, it almost makes me. I didn't realize how funny Michael Shea was until I saw him perform with Dave Chappelle at the Hollywood Bowl. And I'm like, where's this guy? Right? And I don't know if this makes sense, but like doing his own stuff, oh my God, he was hilarious. And I'm like, well, where is this guy? Like the other guy, you're just like it's always political. And I just think it lets down what his comedy is. Those folks know how to sell their ads, and they know what they need to put out there to make money.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I like not Saturday Night Live Michael Shea better than the guy who's doing the Weekend Update. Does that in any way make sense to you?
Yeah, well, Michael Che, I think, is the head writer of SNL right now, and Colin Jost is too as well. I think that is like, I don't think it started like that, but I think that's kind of become the norm, where like the head writers are the Weekend Update people.
Yeah,
it was like that for Tina Fey and Myers. I don't think Amy Poehler was ever the head writer, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I think comedies, like, to a degree, is always going to be political,
right?
In some small way, like, even if it doesn't even occur to you, but there's always, you can always dig deep enough anywhere. I don't know. I think there's a place for it, and like I think the show, the root of the show has always been to be subversive and to always punch up a little bit, and like, because at the time, like, all there was like the very broad comedy of like the 50s and 60s, where it was like fun for the whole family, and there wasn't anything that mirrored what was going on in New York at the time, which was like George Carlin, was like people who are funny and touring and like adult humor, like, solely. And there was nothing like that on network television, and I think that's kind of like what they were going for. I mean, but like, yeah, like you're saying, I think the political sketches feel obligatory at sometimes, because they've kind of written themselves into this formula where it's just like, we always have to do a political sketch for the cold open. And so like it's expected. And so you're like, all right, let's get through this one. You can usually skip it. Like, sometimes it's really funny and they say something like really interesting, but because it's formulaic now, it's like, all right, well, we can skip that one. But but I do think it is like the, I guess, less political ones that are more memorable. The ones that are like easier to, I don't know, like repeat with your friends at school the next morning. That's always like, that's what it was for me. Like, every Saturday night, my friends, we would watch SNL, and then that Monday we would come in and we would repeat all the sketches to each other. Yeah. And it's like the Target lady, like it was oh man, it's like more recently, it's like Bowen Yang as the iceberg from Titanic dropping his new album. Like, that's, I mean, what's not to love about that? It's always like the simplest ideas executed well are always the sketches that you remember. Yeah.
It's like, if you were to pitch and someone pitched it and got it figured out, but like, let's do Jeopardy. We'll have Will Ferrell be Alex Trebek. Yeah. And then one of the characters is going to be Burt Reynolds. And we have Norm Macdonald, who never does any other characters, right? Yeah. And then the other one's going to be Sean Connery, and he's going to say things like "Le tits now," and it's like, wait, that's great. Yeah, exactly. But those are classic things. Or the Undercover Bosses with Adam Driver, who was the guest host, and Leslie Jones. So that will always be hilarious. They nailed it. I mean, they were just so good at that.
Yeah, and I think like there is something to be said about like you can like derive something political from that undercover boss sketch, like because Kylo Ren is like, at least in that sketch, like he was playing the like annoying narcissistic CEO guy that like
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
anyone who's ever worked a corporate job knows this guy, like
Totally.
especially with
Yeah.
at like if you work at a startup, it's like, you know, that guy, and he makes way too much money, and he tries so hard to get everyone on his pickleball team, and like nobody likes hanging out with him.
Yeah. 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 I love it. So the project is great, and I'm super stoked about that. Do you want to talk about any of the past projects you've worked on or anything come up in the future? I want to make sure we plug everything that you guys do.
Yeah, cool. I mean, nothing right now, just a lot of auditioning. I hosted a comedy show for many years, Almost Therapy. Our venue fell through a little while ago, so we've been on hiatus, but we're looking to get a new venue. So definitely keep an eye on that. Yeah, previous projects. If you want to look me up on IMDb and check them out, please do. I think most of them are available for free if you have either Amazon Prime or a Tubi account. So check them out if you nasty. I'm performing more now. I took a break from comedy this year because I was like busy, but I'm going to be performing now. So if you're in New York, come out. But best place to keep up with me is my Instagram. I'm always usually kind of posting on there. Yeah.
We're live on Instagram right now, by the way, for everybody who's looking.
Great.
What's your is it your name, your handle?
Yes, Corinstagramster.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it's probably easier to just like find it, like just copy paste like my name from my first name from IMDb and then just put Stagram. I'll probably come up.
Okay. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, it's super cool. You also did have a really cool movie that I haven't seen yet because I just heard about it. But this, where is that thing at? And I'm pulling it up right now. The Nazi movie, Condor's Nest.
Yes.
And so we just had a lady on a show the other day, and all these things link together. And so she was a student of a teacher who hid Dr. Mengele in Brazil. And so the student became an investigative reporter, and she went back and she told the whole story of, look, Dr. Mengele during World War II, which a lot of that is known, but she really dug in and she took a lot of separate resources and put them into her book. It was great. And then she talks about how he lived his life, because there's all these untold stories that are out there in this movie you're in. It sounds like it talks about Nazi hunting post-war, and it's amazing how many of them got away and everything else. But by the way, everybody should definitely go support everything Corinne does. Look at this incredible book from Antoine.
Oh my god,
it's so good.
Really interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna get my dad.
It's so good.
He would devour that.
Yeah, but Condor's Nest, though, tell us about that real quick so we get back to plugging you. Bettine is awesome, but let's talk about you.
Condor's Nest, that's actually like an even wilder story. I obviously, like, being a comedian and like finding my niche doing like commercials and silly goofy things, I never for a million years expected that I would play like a German spy. I learned German for it. For context, like, my character is a German Jewish woman who escaped during the war and then is now working for a foreign government trying to extradite war criminals from World War II. It's historical fiction like this. None of these people ever actually existed. Trying to extradite them to Jerusalem for trial for war crimes. It's definitely more kind of like a guns blazing, like Indiana Jones style, like more like it's definitely more action adventure-y than actually getting into kind of the politics of it. But it's got a lot of really cool set pieces. Again, me speaking German for like the majority of the movie. And I got to do some stunts. That was cool. Check it out.
I like it. So that the link for the IMDb for there, and you guys all know how to look stuff up, but just look it up and watch it and go for that ride because I guarantee it'll be good. Anything you want to talk about before we wrap this up? And by the way, thanks for being in there and having this great conversation.
Yeah.
I didn't ask a lot of comfortable questions because it's just so fascinating to see someone at the stage in your career, like you're doing it, right? But even you're like, I'm doing it, and it's great to talk about that.
I don't know. I've pretty much just been along for the ride my whole life. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I wish, I don't know. I don't have anything prepared. I'm not a good interviewee, I guess, but
no, you've done great. Come on. You've been killing it. So everybody should definitely go watch Saturday night. It comes out in theaters. Check out the theaters. Those places used to be a lot of fun. They still are.
You have to see it in a theater with your friends. That's the energy that you want. And it's exclusively in theaters for a long time before it'll ever reach streaming.
Right.
So
full theatrical run. Yeah. But if you insist upon waiting, well, then it'll be, I know they haven't released it yet, but it'll be on the streaming service and it will be one that you've heard of before. So definitely do that. And I think you can actually buy bits of it, episodes or something. How many episodes is this thing? Is it 90 minutes or is it episodes?
Oh no, it's a movie. It's a
90 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's great. Is there going to be a sequel? Do we know?
I wish. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what the sequel would be, like the making of the second episode. I don't know. Yeah. No, it's very much like a full story because the last line you hear is live from New York. It's Saturday night. And then we all kind of know what happens.
I love it. All right. Well, then let's wrap this thing up. Hey, thanks everybody for watching. And I'll be right back to you in a sec. Hang on. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching.